Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're navigating a journey that, well, I think many of us face every single day. How do you find your footing when the map of your life feels, half drawn and the path ahead is just kind of shrouded in mist? Do you white knuckle it, trying to meticulously figure out every single step, every contingency? Or do you find a way to sort of surrender to a grander plan, trusting there's a purpose beyond what you can immediately see? This deep dive is like peeling back the layers of an ancient foundational map, not just to reveal historical routes, but to uncover timeless truths that still powerfully guide us through the uncertainties of today.
Absolutely. And what's truly fascinating here is how these ancient narratives aren't simply historical accounts of past events. They just aren't. They are incredibly rich with universal archetypes and enduring patterns that resonate so profoundly with humanity's persistent challenges. They mirror our own struggles, our fears, our hopes. And in turn, they highlight a consistent and frankly unwavering divine response. We're delving into a truly pivotal ancient story today, one that dramatically shifts its focus from those broad strokes of early human history, right down to the intimate details of a specific family line and an extraordinary, unfolding divine promise.
That's precisely it. We're drawing from detailed interpretations of a foundational text, exploring its allegorical depth, its metaphorical richness, looking for those hidden connections, and uncovering its surprising, sometimes, let's be honest, uncomfortable relevance to our modern lives, our internal thoughts, even our most personal struggles. Our mission today is to extract not just profound insights, but genuinely practical, actionable takeaways from this narrative. Think of it as a blueprint, a guide for understanding our own journey of faith, the very nature of human resilience and frailty, and maybe most importantly, the unwavering faithfulness of the divine even when we stumble, which we do.
It is a compelling blueprint, absolutely.
Yeah.
And the entire redemptive plan, this unfolding saga, it really begins with an original promise, a promise that sets everything in motion.
And that's where we start, right at the genesis of this grand narrative. The core of this story, it begins immediately after a foundational human transgression, right back at the very beginning of human history as we understand it. In the aftermath of that pivotal moment, we find this initial, almost audacious promise given by the divine. It was declared, not whispered, that there would be a seed of the woman, and this seed would eventually crush the serpent's head. Even though, in this cosmic struggle, the serpent would, in turn, bruise the seed's heel. Now, this wasn't some quiet, distant prophecy, tucked away in some obscure corner. No, this was a loud, clear declaration, heard by all. And that includes the adversary himself. This promise established the fundamental trajectory for redemption, setting in motion a divine plan that would ultimately overcome the forces of evil.
That's a critical point to underscore. This promise isn't merely a historical footnote. It is, as you said, the foundational thread for everything that follows. It's the establishment of a divine strategy to counteract and ultimately conquer evil. And the implications of such a public, audible declaration, they're immense. If we connect this to the bigger picture, what we're witnessing isn't just about human choices or consequences, it's about a cosmic conflict, a spiritual war, really, where the adversary, whom we understand as the devil or that ancient serpent, is acutely aware of this promise. He heard it too. He's intensely interested in distorting it, preventing its fulfillment at every single turn. His ultimate insidious goal, as revealed in these deeper interpretations, is fundamentally to steal, kill, and destroy, to actively disrupt the very lineage or undermine the faith through which this promised seed will ultimately come. He has a vested interest in chaos, in confusion.
And we see his immediate, almost visceral interest right from the jump. It's not like he waited around. Think back to that initial transgression itself, where he first appeared, twisting truth, tempting humanity to disobey, and in doing so, bringing about a profound spiritual and physical curse. The narrative then moves through early human history, and, well, you see humanity's rapid descent into corruption. It happens fast, leading eventually to a cataclysmic flood, designed to wipe out that old, corrupted world. A reset, you might say. Noah and his family are saved on the ark, a divine intervention. But even after such an immense reordering of the world, we see the adversary's persistent influence almost immediately rearing its head again.
Exactly. Consider Noah, the very man through whom humanity was preserved. After the flood, he plants a vineyard, cultivates it, makes wine, and in a deeply regrettable moment becomes drunk and, importantly, naked. exposed. This leads directly to a curse within his own family, specifically directed towards his son, Ham, and Ham's descendants. Now, what's fascinating about this event, allegorically speaking, is how it mirrors that initial transgression back in the garden. You have humanity consuming the fruit of the tree, in Adam and Eve's case, the forbidden fruit, leading to their eyes opening, realizing their nakedness, and then attempting to cover themselves with fig leaves, their own solution. In Noah's case, it's the fruit of the vine, leading to intoxication and, again, exposure and a curse. It's presented almost as a kind of chemistry version of that first event. It illustrates a recurring human vulnerability, our tendency to misuse what is given, leading to spiritual nakedness and the need for a covering we just cannot provide ourselves.
That's a powerful connection. That cyclical nature of humanity's missteps. It's almost depressing if you think about it too much. And it brings us directly to this recurring, almost inescapable pattern woven throughout this grand narrative. What we're identifying as man's effort versus divine guidance. And this isn't just about big, obvious rebellions like building a golden calf or something. No, it's often much subtler. This pattern highlights humanity's persistent, subtle desire to solve problems, achieve spiritual standing, or find security through its own ingenuity, its own strategies. Rather than trusting divine provision or adhering to a divinely ordained way, we see this subtle but profound flaw manifesting everywhere in these early stories.
It truly is a consistent cycle. This self-reliance, this kind of spiritual autonomy, which, more often than not, leads to negative consequences. A deepening of a curse, or just a clear deviation from the divine path. Take Cain's offering, for instance, a classic example. He brought an offering of plants and fruits, representing his own hard work, right? His own sweat and toil from the very ground that had already been cursed. This was in stark contrast to Abel's offering from the flock, which, biblically, always prefigured a sacrifice requiring blood. Symbolizing faith, acknowledgement of divine atonement, Cain's act wasn't just about the type of offering, it was about the spirit behind it. It was man's effort, trying to come to the divine on his own terms, through his own perceived righteousness or labor, rather than through humble faith in the divine way.
And then, after the flood, after that big reset, you see this insidious pattern resurface again. But this time, with even greater ambition. Through the figure of Nimrod and the infamous Tower of Babel. Nimrod, described as a powerful hunter, a builder, he gathers people and decides to establish this great city and a tower. And he specifically states, and I'm paraphrasing here, but the intent is clear, we're going to reach to heaven through this tower. They even develop advanced technology for the time, making bricks, a more durable, uniform building material than just stone. This allowed them to construct even bigger, taller, more ambitious structures. The narrative explicitly says they aim to reach heaven, not necessarily by literally touching the clouds, maybe, but by using their own collective intelligence, their advanced technology, their unified human effort, as a means to get to God on their own terms. The underlying message was pretty clear. Look what we can do. We found a way to build great things. We'll ascend to God through our technology, our unity, our wisdom. It was a declaration of human self-sufficiency, a desire to bypass the divine altogether.
Clearly see this common thread, can't you? This persistent theme of man's effort.
Mm.
Whether it's Adam and Eve's frantic attempts to cover their nakedness with those flimsy fig leaves, or Cain's self-righteous offering based on his own work, or Nimrod's technologically advanced sky-reaching tower. It's the same core spiritual problem, manifesting in different characters, different circumstances, but always with the same underlying flaw, relying on oneself instead of trusting the divine. And what's crucial for us to grasp, I think, is that this problem, this human tendency towards self-reliance, it never truly goes away. It persists. We continue to see it subtly at play in our own lives, even today.
Right. Here's where it gets really interesting and maybe, a little uncomfortable for us. How many of us, without even realizing it, are still trying to stitch together our own fig leaves in our daily lives? We might find ourselves unconsciously asking, what am I doing to prove I'm worthy? What am I doing to earn approval, either from others or, from a higher power? We have this deep-seated, almost innate tendency to think, okay, I did this really good thing, so surely the divine must be appreciative, or God must be thankful for all this effort I just put in. Now look, it's certainly not wrong to engage in good works. In fact, we're called to them. But the critical distinction lies in our motivation and our understanding. Good works do not make you a child of the divine. Instead, they should simply show that you are a child of the divine, because you have already placed your trust in the one that authentically connects us. If we ever confuse that, if we flip that equation around, we quickly find ourselves worshiping our efforts, worshiping our achievements, our perceived righteousness, instead of worshiping the divine, the source of all grace.
That's the core problem we saw with Adam and Eve, with Cain, with Nimrod.
And it's a powerful, persistent pattern we're about to see unfold again, even with the next central figure in this unfolding narrative.
Which brings us, yeah, to the profound divine call to Abram, a moment that demands a radical act of trust and sets a completely new course for this foundational story. The command from the divine is remarkably unambiguous, almost jarring in its directness. Abram is told, "Get thee out from thy country, then from thy kindred," which means your entire extended family, right? Relatives, mother, father, sister, brother, uncle, nephew, cousin, everyone. And just to drive the point home, in case there was any lingering doubt, and from thy father's house, this is a call to radical separation, to sever ties with everything familiar, comfortable, and secure. It's a literal command to go by yourself.
That truly is a monumental ask, isn't it? I mean, just pause and think about that, especially considering the cultural context of that ancient world where family and tribe were absolutely everything, your identity, your safety net. Leaving your kindred wasn't just packing a bag, it was a tearing away from your identity, your security, your very foundation. It highlights this expectation of absolute immediate obedience and a complete detachment from all worldly ties and human dependencies. But then to add another layer of profound challenge to this test of faith. The destination is completely unclear. God simply says, "Unto a land that I will show thee." Abram is told, in essence, just keep going, keep moving forward until I show you. No specific direction, north, south, east, west is given. Doesn't matter where. Just go.
This truly raises an important question for us to ponder. Is there any confusion in God's statement? I don't think so. The clarity of the command, "get out," coupled with the stark ambiguity of the destination, "unto a land that I will show thee," is precisely designed, I believe, to cultivate an absolute, unshakable reliance on the divine. This communication style is often how the divine interacts with humanity, providing specific, clear instructions on what to do, but frequently leaving many loops open in our minds, leaving the how, when, and where deliberately vague. It's a pedagogical strategy, you could say, forcing that reliance. Our inherent human nature, our logical minds, constantly demand all the facts, the what, why, when, where. We yearn to figure out the how. But this uncertainty, this lack of full disclosure, isn't confusion from the divine's perspective. It's actually a profound sign that the divine is truly dealing with you, engaging with you on a deeper level than mere instruction. The adversary, on the other hand, would want you to feel confused, to be paralyzed by uncertainty, to doubt the clear command because the path isn't fully lit up.
And it's in that context, against that backdrop of radical obedience and stark uncertainty, that the extraordinary, seemingly impossible promises are made to Abram. Just try to wrap your mind around this. An individual being told to leave everything and everyone he's ever known, to walk into the unknown. And he's 75 years old, by himself. And the divine declares, "I will make of thee a great nation." Not just a large family, not just a successful tribe, but an entire nation. Imagine the internal wrestling with that promise, given his age. And it was, oh yeah, he's childless. Then I will bless thee and make thy name great. Thou shalt be a blessing. I'll bless them that bless thee and curse him that curses thee. And profoundly, in these shall all families of the earth be blessed.
These are, as our sources highlight, pretty big and bold statements. I mean, that's an understatement. From a purely human perspective, especially concerning the promise of making a great nation from a 75-year-old childless man, the biological and scientific how would immediately dominate your human thought process. Of course it would. It's like being told, "Give me a single dollar and I'll make you a millionaire by the end of the day," or "Give me 1 hour of your time and I'll give you eternity." These promises, on their face, they defy logic. They defy human capability. They absolutely demand profound faith because, as the scripture states so clearly, without faith, it is impossible to please God. This is precisely why Abram, despite his later imperfections, and we'll get to those, is known universally as the father of faith. He's not perfect. None of these characters are. In fact, their very imperfections make them so relatable, don't you think? But they demonstrate a profound journey toward incredible, almost radical trust, and we can already see the astounding historical fulfillment of these promises. Look at Abram's name, Abraham. Known and revered by all three major Abrahamic religions thousands of years later. Far more widely than any modern celebrity or historical figure we could name. That promise of his name being great, it hasn't just come to pass, it has utterly transcended time and culture. It's staggering.
And the ultimate blessing hinted at in those extraordinary promises that all peoples on earth will be blessed through you finds its culmination, its ultimate fulfillment in one specific descendant, Jesus Christ, his life, his sacrificial death, his victorious resurrection. They represent the culmination of that foundational divine plan. The plan to bring salvation and reconciliation to all nations, to truly bless all families of the earth. The Abrahamic covenant, which begins right here with this seemingly isolated command to one old man, is, in essence, the divine plan of redemption for the entire world. A plan preached beforehand, you might say, to Abraham himself. It profoundly underscores the divine initiative. God chose Abram not based on any perceived merit or accomplishment of Abram's own. It was pure grace, and it underscores his absolute faithfulness to fulfill his promises, even when human beings stumble, which again we do.
This whole narrative about Abram's journey really embodies the very essence of the human experience of faith and obedience, especially when faced with profound uncertainty and quite naturally fear. Its modern relevance is just unmistakable. We are constantly challenged in our own lives to step out in faith and trust divine guidance, even when the path ahead is unclear, even when it means leaving our own deeply entrenched comfort zones. And we all have those, don't we? This can manifest in countless ways. Maybe embracing a new, daunting challenge in our careers that pushes us beyond our perceived limits, or pursuing missional endeavors that require radical shifts in our lives, or simply exceeding personal limitations. Disconnecting from the familiar for profound spiritual growth that just cannot happen otherwise. It's about being willing to walk without seeing the entire path laid out.
So what does this all mean for us today, in our busy, often overwhelming lives? It means that sometimes the greatest leaps of faith, the most significant acts of trust, look a lot like walking into the complete unknown, trusting that the guide knows the way, even if we don't have all the GPS coordinates neatly plugged in. And as we continue to follow Abram's story, we quickly discover that this path isn't always straight. It isn't always easy, and it isn't always perfectly walked by the person called to walk it. In fact, right after this monumental call and these incredible promises, Abram, despite the clear, unambiguous instructions, makes his first significant deviation from the divine path.
Yes, and this is where the humanity of Abram truly comes to the forefront again. It's almost immediate. Despite being told unequivocally to leave his kindred to go by yourself, Abram brings Lot, his deceased brother's son. He brings him along. This act is often described, quite aptly, I think, as figuring instead of faith. Abram's very human nature, perhaps a genuine sense of compassion, maybe a desire to protect his orphan nephew, or even a deep-seated fear of being utterly alone in a new land, leads him to try and help out God, essentially, to rationalize a deviation from the divine command, perhaps citing Lot's fatherless state as justification. This highlights a common, deeply ingrained human tendency. We might have a profound, even radical faith for ourselves, for our own journey, but we often struggle immensely to trust the divine, to care for others in our lives, especially those we feel responsible for.
Can we all identify with that? Oh, man. That powerful urge to figure it out, to help God out, when the divine has simply, clearly, unequivocally said go or leave. We might have unwavering faith for our own journey, believing God will provide for us, protect us. But then we get caught up in trying to manage, control, or even manipulate the outcomes for others in our lives. Our kids, our spouses, our friends. It's that subtle shift from trusting divine providence for all to feeling personally responsible for someone else's well-being or spiritual path. It reminds me powerfully of that common anecdote you hear sometimes about immigrant parents who, having struggled immensely to build a life from scratch, then try to protect their children from similar hardships. They desperately want their kids to inherit the values of hard work, resilience, commitment. But by shielding them from the very struggles that forged those values in the first place, they inadvertently prevent their children from developing the same depth of character or self-reliance. There's a profound danger in trying to be the Holy Spirit for others, stepping in where the divine intends to act, where divine wisdom or even divine discipline is meant to shape a character.
And almost immediately after this deviation, this choice to figure instead of faith, Abram faces his first major test of circumstances. It doesn't take long. He journeys into the land of Canaan, the very land the divine promised to bless his seed and establish his nation. And what happens? Boom. A famine immediately strikes the land. And to make matters even more complicated, the Canaanites, who are descendants of the cursed Ham, are already there. They're occupying the promised land. This sudden famine is presented allegorically as an immediate target aimed right at Abram by the adversary, strategically designed to create profound doubt, panic, and to test the very limits of his fledgling faith. It's a direct assault on the promise he just received.
It's just like that story of Jesus and his disciples in the boat, isn't it? Jesus tells them very clearly, get in the boat, we're going to the other side. Simple instruction. Now, these are mighty fishermen, seasoned sailors. They know the sea, they know boats, they know storms. This is their wheelhouse. But almost immediately, a violent storm arises, and despite their expertise, despite their human skill, they panic. They truly believe they're about to perish. Meanwhile, Jesus is sleeping soundly in the boat, trusting the Father's word, completely undisturbed by the tempest raging around him. It's a powerful illustration that when we start doing things aligned with a higher purpose, when we step out in obedience to a divine call, we can absolutely expect challenges. It's almost guaranteed. These storms, whether they're financial setbacks, health crises, relational conflicts, or simply overwhelming fear, they're not random. They're often designed by the adversary to test our trust, to see if we will choose faith or default back to our own human logic and panic.
And Abram's response to this immediate, intense test of famine is deeply telling. And unfortunately, yeah, very relatable for most of us, I suspect. He descends into Egypt. He makes this choice entirely on his own, without any divine instruction to do so. This is Abram, the father of faith, using what he perceives as common sense, logic, and what we might call Plan B. Egypt, in this narrative context, is consistently depicted as a place of human strength, worldly prosperity, and sadly, a place where other kinds of gods are worshipped. It's a land where, by implication, the prince in the power of the air. That's a biblical term referring to the spiritual force of opposition, the adversary's influence over the world's systems, allowing certain worldly endeavors to prosper, in a way that seems antithetical to divine blessing, allows things to flourish. Even when the promised land is suffering famine, this raises an important question. Why would the divine allow the promised land, the place of blessing, to experience famine while a land of other gods, a land of worldly power, prospers? It highlights a profound test of faith, trusting the divine in the midst of seeming contradiction. When circumstances appear to defy the very promises given, it also underscores our persistent human tendency to choose human solutions, to go down to Egypt, rather than exercising divine patience and enduring through hardship in the promised land. We often prioritize immediate, tangible needs like food over trusting in God's intangible, long-term provision.
It's a profound difference, isn't it, between truly internalizing and actually living out Psalm 23. Yeah, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. And Abram's approach, which is more like, uh-oh, famine. I'm going to get worried. I'm going to get practical, and I'm going down to Egypt because that's where your food is. He thought he had it all figured out, opting for his own logic and self-preservation over the path of radical trust he was called to. And while in Egypt, Abram makes another, perhaps even more alarming deviation from the path of integrity, the deception involving Sarai. He instructs his incredibly beautiful wife, who we later learn is also his half-sister, a detail that comes relevant later when we see the consequences of intertwining lines, to say she's merely his sister. Why? Because he fears the Egyptians will kill him to take her for themselves. He's afraid for his own life.
This act, in its starkness, truly reveals profound human frailty and the tendency to rely on fear and manipulation rather than full, unwavering trust in divine promises. Abram is, in essence, selling his wife to save his own skin, believing in that moment of panic that he got this, that he can handle the situation better than the divine can. It's a vivid illustration of Satan, the author of confusion, at work, twisting circumstances, making a fundamentally bad, deceptive situation seem good because of the material gain Abram receives as a result. Sheep, oxen, donkeys, male and female servants, camels. He gets rich from this deception. This material acquisition, seemingly a blessing, is in fact a deeply distorted definition of true blessing. It's fool's gold.
Can you even imagine the internal landscape of that situation? Seriously. He gets all this wealth, sheep, oxen, camels, servants, thinking he's winning, thinking he's successfully navigated a perilous situation through his cleverness. All while his beautiful wife, the very vessel of the divine promise, is locked away in Pharaoh's house, potentially exposed to unimaginable threats. It's a stark, chilling reminder that what looks like a win on the outside, what might be celebrated as a blessing by worldly standards, might actually be a profound spiritual disaster, a devastating compromise of integrity and trust. Many people, even today, fall into this trap, don't they? They serve a higher power or engage in spiritual practices hoping for natural, tangible blessings. A fatter bank account, a nicer house, a more impressive car, external recognition, not truly understanding that genuine, lasting blessing is knowing the divine intimately and being known by the divine, not for what you can get materially. This is the same Cain or Nimrod effort, isn't it? A self-serving attempt to gain favor, thinking that external gain somehow equals divine approval. It echoes that powerful, sobering biblical warning about those who might say, "Lord, haven't we done all these wonderful works in your name?" Aye, only to be told chillingly, "Depart from me, you worker of iniquity, I never knew you." It underscores the critical difference between outward appearance and inward reality.
But despite Abram's deception, despite his fear-driven choices, and despite his profound human failures, the narrative powerfully and unequivocally demonstrates the divine's unwavering faithfulness and protection. It's stunning, really. Even in this clear moment of disobedience, the divine intervenes directly. Our source details that the divine plagues Pharaoh and his house with a great plague, specifically because of Sarai. Then, in an almost ironic twist of cosmic justice, Pharaoh himself, a pagan ruler, and in this context, almost an unwitting representative of the adversary's worldly system, calls Abram and profoundly rebukes him for his dishonesty, asking, "What is this thou hast done unto me? Why didst thou not tell me that she was thy wife?" This is the divine stepping in powerfully, unequivocally to protect his promise, to ensure that the lineage through which the seed will come remains undefiled. It's a remarkable moment when Pharaoh, the very embodiment of the worldly system, acts with more integrity and righteous indignation than the chosen man of faith in that moment.
It truly is. It's a profound, almost startling illustration that the divine will not allow a grand, overarching plan to be thwarted. Not even by the poor decisions, the fear, or the outright deception of a chosen individual. The promised seed must come through Sarai, and the divine will ensure that lineage, that divine blueprint, is preserved no matter what. This event even foreshadows future plagues on Egypt related to another chosen figure, Moses, doesn't it? Highlighting a consistent, powerful pattern of divine protection and intervention when his purposes are at stake. And what's even more astonishing, what truly highlights the depth of divine grace and provision, is what happens next. Pharaoh, still reeling from the plagues, orders Abram, his wife, and all his possessions, including all the wealth Abram gained from his deception, and even the Egyptian maidservants, a seemingly minor detail that will, subtly but significantly, play into future narratives, hinting at Hagar's entrance. To leave. Just get out.
This is absolutely crucial for our understanding. The divine does not void his promise because of Abram's error. Not at all. Knowing all things from the beginning, being omniscient, the divine wasn't surprised by Abram's failure or his fear. He knew this would happen. This reinforces a foundational truth. A divine promise, once given, is secured by divine character. By the very nature and faithfulness of the divine, not by our flawless human performance. Thank goodness, this is profound grace in action. Even though Abram made a wrong decision, even though he stumbled in fear, the divine allowed him to retain the material gains, even those acquired through deception, and to continue on the journey. It's a powerful illustration that the divine fundamentally uses imperfect people, people who stumble, people who are afraid, people who make poor choices, to fulfill overarching eternal purposes. Divine faithfulness is not dependent on human perfection. It is a constant, unwavering force.
And as Abram continues his journey, despite his detours, despite his imperfections, we see a recurring practice emerging. A spiritual discipline that provides a profound lesson for us today. The consistent building of altars. Abram builds these altars at key points along his journey, specifically where the divine appears to him, where promises are made, where reassurance is given, like at Shechem and later at Bethel, which literally means house of God. He doesn't just pass through these places. He actively calls upon the name of the divine at these altars. It's a deliberate act.
These altars serve as powerful physical and spiritual markers, markers of divine encounters and blessings. They are not merely piles of stones, they are places of worship and communion, moments of profound connection designed to cement one's relationship with the divine. Building such altars, whether physical or metaphorical, in one's life allows for recollection, for memory, and provides a kind of secret place, a spiritual anchor to return to in times of trial, doubt, or temptation. It's a visible, tangible testament to the divine's presence and faithfulness in a specific, personal moment in time. They are memorials, not just to God's faithfulness in general, but to our personal experience of it.
So for us today, living in a world where we rarely build physical altars out of stone, the modern relevance of this practice is absolutely clear and essential, don't you think? We should be building them deeply, powerfully, in our soul, in our mind, in our memory, and in our spirit. This means consciously recognizing those moments, those turning points, those impossible situations when only the divine could have possibly gotten us through. We all have them if we look. These become our personal safe places, our spiritual sanctuaries, to return to when the adversary comes knocking with doubt or when the storms of life, whether financial, relational, or existential, rage around us. It's about having those mental bookmarks or spiritual waypoints in your life. Those undeniable moments where you can look back and say, with absolute certainty, the divine met me right there. That was an altar moment. It's the practice of recalling past faithfulness when facing current, overwhelming difficulties, drawing strength from remembered grace.
It truly is. Just as Abram returned to these altars, physically retracing his steps sometimes and recalling the divine encounters, we too should have more than one such secret place in our spirit, maybe many. These are moments we can consciously call upon, remembering how we were met, how we were guided, how we were provided for, even in the midst of our own imperfections. It is that profound, consistent communion, that active remembrance and gratitude, that cements the relationship and builds resilience for whatever future challenges may arise.
As we conclude this deep dive, we've truly unpacked some profound and enduring lessons from this ancient narrative. A blueprint, really, for both human nature and divine promise. We've seen the unwavering nature of divine promises, a promise made at the very beginning that sets a grand redemptive plan in motion, despite all human failing. We've seen the persistent human tendency towards man's effort, our often subtle, sometimes insidious attempts to achieve spiritual standing or solve problems through our own means, our own ingenuity, our own strength. And we've identified the adversary's relentless cunning attempts to derail faith, to sow confusion, and to distort what true divine blessing really looks like.
And through it all, through every human misstep and every challenging circumstance, we've witnessed the enduring, boundless faithfulness of the divine. It's the constant thread. We've seen the
So as you reflect on this deep dive, maybe consider this in your own life. What fig leaves are you still consciously or unconsciously trying to stitch together? What efforts, what self-generated solutions are you still trying to use to cover up or fix things that maybe only divine grace, only divine provision can truly address? And conversely, where are the altars you can build or powerfully revisit in your memory, those undeniable moments of divine intervention and faithfulness that can serve as a testament to God's unwavering presence and guidance in your life, especially when the path ahead still seems shrouded in mist?
And this narrative really urges us to examine our own lives even deeper, doesn't it? What are we still holding on to? What familiar comforts or self-reliant strategies might be hindering our spiritual growth and preventing us from stepping fully into a divinely ordained future? How can we cultivate a deeper, more radical trust in the divine in uncertain times, especially when the path ahead is anything but clear and the logical solution seems to contradict the faithful one? And finally, how can we, as recipients of such profound, undeserved divine blessings and grace, truly embody that same spirit? How can we be a genuine blessing to others in our communities and in the wider world, reflecting the very grace and faithfulness we've explored today?